Hello and welcome to CXO Bytes, a podcast brought to you by the Green Software Foundation and dedicated to supporting chiefs of information, technology, sustainability, and AI as they aim to shape a sustainable future through clean software. We will uncover the strategies and a big green move that's helped drive results for business and for the planet. I am your host, Sanjay Podder. Hello, welcome to another episode of CXO Bytes, where we bring you unique insights into the world of sustainable software development from the view of the C-suite. I am your host, Sanjay Podder. Today, I am joined by Kerry O'Donnell. Kerry is a forward-thinking executive in the world of AI, digital transformation, and sustainability. She has led global IT strategy at the Estee Lauder companies and now advises organizations on the responsible integration of AI and sustainability through her work with sustainableIT.org and the Digital Workplace Group. In this episode, we will explore how digital workplace transformation intersects with ESG, what it means to lead with the purpose in the age of AI, and how the next generation of tech leaders can build business that are both innovative and resilient. Kerry, welcome to CXO Bytes. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Sanjay. It's really great to be here. I've spent most of my career living right at that intersection of technology, people, and purpose. And as you mentioned, at Estee Lauder companies, I led global digital transformations, the kind of work where you're modernizing systems, but you're also making IT a force for sustainability. Because every IT decision we make during a system transformation is also a climate decision. Will this feature or hosting approach, data model use more or less energy is a question we get to ask at every point. And then today, through sustainableIT.org and the Digital Workplace Group, I get to help companies connect two big forces shaping business right now: AI and sustainability. And as the technical editor of an upcoming book, Sustainable IT Real-World Lessons from Global Leaders, I've had a front row seat to how companies everywhere are learning to make green IT not just good ethics, but good for their businesses. And I'm happy to be here to share some of that with you.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to reading that book. The first edition was fantastic, so I'm really looking forward to how this book shapes up in the new edition. And I think you are doing a major work there as an editor, isn't it, Kerry?
Yeah, I'm the technical editor. Yeah, and it should be coming out very soon. I think they're trying to land the plane on the release date.
That should be a great read. So, and before we dive in here, a reminder that everything we talk about will be linked in the show notes below this episode. So, Kerry, the very first question, your work spans innovation, digital workplace transformation, and sustainability. From your perspective, what does it take for a C-suite leader to embed sustainability into core digital strategy? Not just as an add-on, but as a foundational principle?
Yeah, well, this is the million-dollar question. And honestly, I think it's one that every boardroom should be wrestling with. And I think there's three ways we can do that. First, we could actually flip the mental model. Sustainability doesn't always have to be a cost center. It can be a value engine. When we modernized systems at Estee Lauder companies, we expected several wins, better functionality, efficiency, cost savings, but we discovered an extra value hiding kind of in plain sight. Because every time we cleaned up technical debt, we also shrank the environmental footprint for it. So we were having less waste, lower energy. It was an extra bonus win we had.
Wonderful. And I remember having written on this topic a few years back on uniting tech and strategy, tech and sustainability. And one of the interesting data point we saw was businesses that integrate technology strategy and sustainability strategy. They outperform their competitors, even in the shareholder value, the returns to the shareholder. So it's not only good for the environment, it's good for the business. So
Exactly.
that is very, very important. So it's
Right.
turning out to be a competitive differentiation for business.
Exactly. And especially in the long term, right? It makes a bigger and bigger difference. So one of the other things that you can do to kind of help propel that is to treat your architecture like a blueprint for change. Because no matter what business you're in, you get to a point where everybody's like, just ship it, just get it out the door, right? We need to keep moving. And that's a key point where environmental debt can sneak in. Because enterprise architecture, they can act like your seatbelt for innovation, right? Keeping the speed, but building a little safety for the riders. So enterprise architecture defines the green principles for design in your applications and systems early, and they can help make them stick with their standards. So, but we don't want to just rely on the enterprise architects. We all have some responsibility here. And with that pressure, innovate quickly, and so many vendors coming out touting AI-driven tools to make it even easier to experiment at speed, like that's wonderful, but we've got to make sure our momentum doesn't outrun our governance. So that's why we need IT procurement, as they can provide that a second layer of discipline, translating responsible design with an extra layer of responsible buying. So together, I think enterprise architect procurement creates some guardrails to keep sustainability built in by design and not just kind of bolted on or skipped.
Absolutely. I think you have touched upon some very key points here. Enterprise architecture and having sustainability as a key non-functional requirement, NFR, embedded in rather than an afterthought. You have also highlighted how do we look into, for example, procurement practices, because that's a way we can manage emissions, Scope 3 emissions from our suppliers, from the value chain. And that again becomes very important. How do you really know how green are your vendors, your supply chain players? Are they doing their bit of work?
Exactly, right? Yeah. How do we know that? So, and you're kind of touching on, like, we have to measure it, right? We can't manage what we don't measure. And that's one thing that there's a really helpful kind of tool that sustainableIT.org offers. They offer 240 standards that give IT leaders and the teams a common language across your portfolio, across different vendors and technologies. These are like IT specific ESG topics and metrics for measuring and reporting on the impact of your technologies that relates to sustainability. And then once we can get that into our dashboards and reports, right, the numbers become real with something to measure. And, it's a tipping point where we can actually start maybe competing a little bit to improve it, right? And shift our culture and our mindset on that.
Absolutely. I've seen organizations, for example, introduce gamification to see how different teams are doing, to encourage them to do more. And that works again pretty well. So moving to a slightly different area, which is top of everyone's mind today, artificial intelligence, generative AI. It is transforming enterprise, but it is also a cause of concern, environmental impact, whether it's the energy required or the emissions, water, e-waste, and there are a lot of other similar considerations. In a recent article titled "The Incompatibility of AI and Decarbonization" in Le Monde, the authors warn that unless managed very carefully, the rapid growth of AI could derail global decarbonization efforts rather than support them. So that is really a cause of concern. With that in mind, how should executives think about the balance between rapid AI adoption and long-term responsibility? What steps can they take to ensure that their innovation strategies do not undermine their climate commitments?
Yeah, that's a really timely article you found there. And it really captures the tension we're all feeling right now. How do we move fast without overheating the planet, And you're right. It's the Environment Act, especially, in IT as it relates to energy, water, and e-waste is really substantial. There is responsible AI governance, right? And committing to green AI principles that makes a big difference. We talked about governance not necessarily being red tape. It just could be some seatbelts for safe innovation, right? Speed with safety. But if we really need to design AI with intention, which starts kind of asking a simple question: does this AI model truly add value? Because sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes, the greenest AI is no AI at all, right? Do we really need AI? But when AI is the right tool, we can still build it responsibly. So there was a publication from the University of Sussex and the Digital Humanities Climate Coalition that I helped co-author called The Cloud and the Climate. We laid out some practical steps to help companies manage AI's environmental footprint without slowing down your innovation. So there's a couple things you can do, is how it looks in practice. And one is kind of taking on the do I need AI at all is right size your models, because bigger isn't always smarter for the planet. Small language models and pruned LLMs can perform beautifully for a fraction of the energy. So it's basically saying getting the right size model, like, you would the right size car for what you're doing. You don't need an SUV for everything. So just be more choiceful in your situation there. And another thing we can do is train AI where we've got clean energy, right? Your data center location matters. Burning workloads in regions with a high percentage of renewable energy makes a difference. Or look to run at off-peak hours where you can shrink your carbon footprint up to 5-fold is what you can get if you do this really strategically. And one smart thing to do is to be ruthless about our data hygiene, right? Most companies have unused duplicate data that's just quietly burning energy every day. If we can archive it, dedupe it, delete it, that digital decluttering has a real climate impact. And I think, too, another important thing we all can do is demand transparency. Our AI vendors should show us their carbon math. A lot of them just come up with marketing slogans like, we support green hosting. We really want to push for verifiable numbers. So AI can absolutely support decarbonization, but only if we build it sincerely, like we mean it. The future can be AI for the climate if it's done right.
I think you've touched upon quite a number of good points here, including, sometimes the best AI is no AI. Selecting the right T-shirt size when it comes to the AI models. The bigger is not necessarily better, especially if you look at energy use and environmental impact, so fine tuning. And you also touched upon carbon aware, right? Where are you running your workloads, and what time of the day, which location, where is the carbon intensity lower? Those are important consideration. And also about green data. I had earlier done a study on dark data, where we found that a lot of data enterprises they never use it. But when you store those data, it corresponds to more energy use and consequent emissions and impact on environment.
Like an iceberg, isn't it, right? There's the amount of unused dark data you think you have, but then there's, the real amount there is. It just builds up over time.
You also touched upon asking AI vendors, right, to show their carbon map. So if I just broaden that conversation, in general, you have highlighted the role of vendors, supply chain. One of the things that the Green Software Foundation has therefore done is create the software carbon intensity specification. It's a way to express the carbon emission for maybe the number of API calls you're making or number of fraud detections you're doing. So it is in some way one can find out how green is the software being offered or the product being offered. So my question to you would be, how can CIOs and CTOs bring climate intelligence into their procurement decisions, especially when evaluating AI and cloud technologies? By using SCI or similar frameworks to compare vendors, surface hidden emissions in the stack, and embed sustainability criteria into the contracts and RFPs, are those the right things to do? Because very often I see many RFPs do make no mention of sustainability requirement. Whereas there are few that explicitly ask for it, but even today, most of the RFPs, they forget to ask about sustainability requirements.
And it's such an easy ask, right? It's just a couple sentences in your RFP. It's an amazingly simple, easy thing you can do that can start to make a big impact, especially as we all do it together, right? Because as you mentioned, for most companies, the biggest emissions are hiding in our supply chain. Those scope 3 emissions, which are those indirect emissions from vendors and partners. They're often, what I've found through the research, is 11.4 times higher than what we generate from our own company operations. That's a huge amount. So that's where a huge change can happen, right? And we do have leverage here. We have lots of services and partners from our vendors. So procurement is that powerful leverage point. So I think what we can do is we can treat carbon like cost, right? You talked about the software carbon intensity standards that let us suddenly compare across our applications in a more common language. So emissions then start to become a number that we can compare, right? Which makes a big difference as you make your decisions on who to use, and baking it into the contracts, right? All the RFPs, MSAs, they can ask for verifiable data, not just some blank marketing blurb. And if the vendor can't provide it, right, not everybody can right now, that's okay, but keep asking, right? Every renewal, keep asking. And they'll start to hear that and realize this is a new table stakes. And some companies I've seen, including Estee Lauder companies, we basically would say, okay, if you don't have it now, we're expecting it. It's going to become a standard for all the vendors at a certain point in time, right? So they know that it's coming. So we're giving them some lead time to make that switch and be able to be more transparent with that. So, but yeah, I think too, we could look to maybe expand our definition of cost, right? As we look to procurement and buying things, right? Because the laptop energy's footprint is 80% embedded before it ever gets to us, right? It's all in the manufacturing part. So if we look to vendors who don't just provide us the devices, but also look for vendors who certify, repair, recycle it. If you factor in the carbon costs, you start seeing partners that are more sustainable. So for example, when evaluating ITAD, our IT asset disposition vendors, we can look for ones that not just provide us the hardware, but also help with a social impact, a social impact oriented organization. So one example of those is Human IT. And they also retire equipment responsibly, and they also empower local communities. They provide affordable internet, digital skills training, and ongoing tech support for people who've been left on the wrong side of the digital divide. So it's kind of one of those rare moments, just depending on which vendor you pick, you can, shrink the e-waste, right, by having them recycle. And you can also advance digital equity, and expand what people are calling your technology's heartprint. So, you're not just buying software, you're actually helping us buy into a cleaner future.
That's a great example you have given, how we can even not only procure, but even dispose all these assets in a very responsible and sustainable way, thereby protecting both the planet and the community, right? There's a fantastic example. You have been actively engaged with thought leaders in this space in sustainableIT.org. Um, how do you view the role of developer communities and movements like the Green Software Foundation in complementing the top-down ESG strategy?
So I love this question because it gets to the heart of like what it takes to have real transformation. You can have the best ESG strategy in the world top down, but if it doesn't translate into the day-to-day work of your developers, it just stays stuck in presentations. So sustainability, like once it gets written into the code base, that makes a big difference, right? It's actually in practical use. And that's where developer communities, especially movements like the Green Software Foundation, are game changers. They make sustainability actionable. So I think we could think of it like maybe like a relay race. C-suite is setting the pace with the goals, and they hand off the baton, right? The vision, the standards, and the funding. But really, the developers who take that baton, they're carrying it all the way over to the finish line, translating those goals into real world impact, one sustainable coding choice at a time. So what the GSF brings to this equation is a shared language and toolkit. They have standards, open standards, such as the carbon software, open standards like the software carbon intensity metric that let the engineers see the carbon costs of their software. It's been called the nutrition label for your code. I really like that. And because once you can measure it, you can actually improve it. And that visibility across the developers can spark culture changes. Developers can start optimizing workloads, not just performance and cost. They can look to also the energy efficiency dimension. When they run cost compute intensive jobs during cleaner grid hours, it's the concept known as carbon awareness. So everybody starts to win, the company, the culture, and the customer, all through the developer community. So
Absolutely. That's a great point you make. And we have been very much excited with the collaboration we have had, the Green Software Foundation and sustainableIT.org. We really complement each other in the top-down ESG, strategy. So, Kerry, any question you have for me? I have been asking you a lot of questions around your expertise in this space, and we are very glad that you joined us today to share everything that you are doing, both in sustainableIT.org and as well as in your prior role in driving IT strategy for Estée Lauder, right? So those things have been really, really valuable for us. Anything that you'd like, any perspective from me on what we are doing in this space?
Yeah, well, you're also a pro at this, right? And you've really helped drive sustainable transformation across many industries. Do you have any timely advice to give CIOs who want to ensure their digital transformation roadmaps align with global climate goals and stakeholder expectations?
Absolutely. And, you made my life easier because you have touched upon so many different points already. But
minds, Sanjay, like minds.
When we started the Green Software Foundation in 2021, our first work was obviously to make this area actionable for developers, right? So we brought out all these amazing tools, standards, trainings. We started working on the SCI. Those were early days. But it was very, very obvious that to sustain this momentum, it's very essential that there has to be a leadership mandate. So this has to come right from the top, from the CEO or the CIO or the CSO or the CDO. Only then this can be sustained and this can be scaled, number one. Now, what it also means, therefore, is there has to be a culture of sustainable IT, sustainable AI practices, right? The second thing is having a strong governance in this space is very essential. When we are reviewing the projects, and you kind of highlighted that, are we monitoring the emissions? Are we seeing whether the targets have been set and are those targets being met? Are these targets having any kind of linkage to specific regulations or business standards that matter to us in the organization? And how do you keep people up to date on the latest and greatest in this field? Because this field has been evolving rapidly, especially with AI. What I'm also observing is while sustainable IT, we had to do some amount of awareness with enterprises, but with sustainable AI, every enterprise is acutely aware about the environmental impact of AI. So they are expecting that AI is being built in a responsible and sustainable way. So that's a given. People expect that. It's not an add-on. And then when these kind of conditions are created by the top leadership, then the developers next need real tools. So we are now converting the intent to actions. They need real tools, real standards, real training. What are my levers to decarbonize inferencing? All new evolving areas, right? How can I lower emission from inferencing? How do I lower the emission during training? What are my options from a carbon-aware deployment strategy, right? So there are so many new things happening. And I think organizations like sustainableIT.org and Green Software Foundation, they have been very successful in getting like-minded people together to create a collective intelligence and collective action in this space. And that has really helped accelerate the development of the space. In fact, the book you are editing right now, we're really looking forward to the Sustainable IT Playbook because the first version was amazing. And I'm sure that this version I'm absolutely sure will touch upon a lot of AI, right? Because between both the versions.
One of the big expansions is on AI. So yes, because it's such a timely topic.
And there has been such an explosion of AI between the first version and the new version, and I am really looking forward to reading it. So, a closing question for you, Kerry. A lot of people would love to hear more about your work you are doing right now with sustainableIT.org and other organizations in this space. Where can they follow you?
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. They can find me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people who are figuring out how to make AI and sustainability work together. Sanjay, it's all about being like-minded, and together we can propel things forward. So yeah, please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, we have come to the end of this podcast episode, and all that's left for me is to say thank you so much, Kerry. That was really great. Thanks for your contribution, and we really appreciate you coming to CXO Bytes.
Oh, you're welcome. It was wonderful to be here. Really terrific. You asked such thoughtful questions, Sanjay.
And we love the responses you gave, based on your very, very deep work you have done in this space. So that's all for this episode of CXO Bytes. All the resources for these episodes are in the show description below. And you can visit podcast.greensoftware.foundation to listen to more episodes of CXO Bytes. See you all in the next episode. Bye for now.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Just a reminder to follow CXO Bytes on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. And please do leave a rating and review if you like what we are doing. It helps other people discover the show, and of course, we want more listeners. To find out more about the Green Software Foundation, please visit greensoftware.foundation. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.